Jason Sautel is a veteran firefighter whose career was defined by saving the lives of others, all while he needed to be saved himself. In his new book, The Rescuer, he recounts the trials that led him to a dark place and how Jesus ultimately led him out. He also shares how he met his wife, who introduced him to the Lord, and how staring death in the face changed the course of his future. He now writes and speaks about Christ to thousands of people online as he shares his story of hope and transformation. Please welcome Jason Sautel.
Jason, hi, welcome. Thank you so much. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. I'm just all fired up after hearing your worship team and a couple cups of coffee, so I'm excited to be here. Thank you so much.
You know, here in California, we love our firefighters because we're constantly, feels like always having these fires, and really affects so much, the fires affect so much more than our safety. I mean, it's the air and everything else, and so thank you so much for what you do, and all the firefighters around the world have done. We're appreciative of it. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Well, I really want to talk to you about your awesome book, The Rescuer. It's a great story. It's a huge encouragement, especially for people who are going through challenges, going through tough times. First, tell us a little bit. I mean, you're a first responder, but one of the things you say in your book is that you realized that your life needed rescuing. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, you know, as a firefighter, you go out the door, meaning you will leave the firehouse to go on responses sometimes 15, 20 times a day. And you're going out constantly helping people when they're at their bottom and they need someone to rescue them. So you show up and you want to help them and you want to provide them with the care and the love and compassion they deserve. But part of that emergency attaches itself to you. And when it does, it starts to weigh you down and it's a burden and it just hurts. And you go back to the firehouse, and even though you're still not on the scene, that scene is inside of you, and it's just a lot of work, and it starts to really get you at times. But imagine if you were on that fire engine and it's 2 a.m. and you pull up in front of a house and there's just flames coming out of it, and there's people screaming that folks are trapped inside, and maybe you can even hear the screams of the people inside. And it is your duty to go in and save them. It just really, really tears you up on the inside. That you start thinking, what about 1 minute sooner? What if we would have done this differently?
Yeah.
And it's really can be tough at times, you know. So I like people to think about it from that perspective so they can really get a feeling of what it feels like fighting fire. And that's why I added those scenes to my book.
So it's like you almost feel like it's your fault, even though it's not. You start to wonder, if I'd just been there a second or just given a little, like an extra 10%, would I have helped that kid? And you've actually had even kids die, right? I mean, there was one case where someone died and you had this conversation with your wife, and that was a big part of your salvation story, right?
Yeah, it was really tough. So prior to me becoming a Christian, it was really hard for me to open up about my job because most people couldn't handle what I was struggling with. Well, when I met Christy, who is a Christian,
That's
she
your
brought
wife.
something different into me. And I was able to talk to her about, we had a little girl who was injured in a car accident. And I was telling her what happened, and the girl passed away in my arms, and her mom was there, and the struggle was just crushing me. And so Christy said, well, that little girl's with Jesus. Do you believe that? And I didn't have an answer for her at the time. And that kind of started the process of Christy leading me to the Lord.
That's awesome. And I can't imagine going through something that horrible. You know, so I have a daughter, and everybody loves kids, right? I mean, it's like kids is like the worst thing that can happen. So for you to actually experience that. So, but it is interesting that maybe the worst trauma you could witness, God was able to use that to transform your heart. What changed in your life after? Because you did, like, you were like, she was like, we're going to church, right? It's like you paused. I saw that or something, right? Like you.
Yeah, she actually, believe it or not, 2 weeks into dating, she told me that she was in love with me, but she was not going to keep dating me unless I went to church. Well, don't tell her I was in love with her at the time, too. So it made the decision easier to go to church with her. Yeah. But just hearing the gospel message and hearing the love that the Lord had for me and understanding that the scriptures are truth actually gave me clarity on everything that I was dealing with. And it finally made me realize that there's bad things happening. How can I use them in a way that will glorify God? And that's just kind of what I look to do with my life, and take those experiences from my past and say, all right, God, this was horrible and this is what it did for me. How can I use this pain within me to glorify you and bless other people?
I think another part that I sort of pulled from your story was the ability to be vulnerable. Like, it seemed like coming to Christ allowed you to be humble and not just have to carry everything yourself, and be able to like tell your wife, this wrecked me. I'm not going to sleep well tonight. This is bugging me. And it seems like that's a big part too, is when you find your identity in the Lord, you're able to get some of that empathy by being honest about something that's bugging you.
Right. I always fall back onto the foundation. It gives us a foundation to start building on. So everything that had been bugging me, I held inside in my emptiness. Well, once that emptiness was filled with the Lord's love through my faith, I then had a place where I could now, quote, leave it, because we hear that all the time. But leave it was I could talk to God. I could read the scriptures on my way home from work. And then I could approach Christy. And sometimes I would tell her, I just need some time. But my wife is so loving. She could see it in my face or even smell it when I hug her, just we had a rough fire. Yeah. And sometimes she'd just give me that time, and she would go into prayer with me, or prayer for me, and then we would pray together. Yeah. And then we were able to start building again, because this world will rip things away from you. It'll crush you. It's like this huge pain machine. And to be able to have a place now to say, all right, let's fall back on the gospel message and start growing forward. It has just done so much, because my wife is also a labor and delivery nurse. And so she comes home from the hospital after selflessly caring for others. And it's the same process. I can see it in her eyes that something happened. And now we have a place, by having a Christ-centered marriage, a Christ-centered life, to start building forward.
Well, Jason Sautel, thank you so much for your message. And if you're watching at home, you can follow Jason on Facebook. He has a great ministry there. But most of all, get his book, The Rescuer. It's a great story. And if somebody needs encouragement, especially if somebody's a first responder or anybody that seems to be kind of going through trauma and maybe needs to kind of let the walls down a little bit and let the Lord in, I want to encourage you to get this book for them. Jason Sautel, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. You guys have a great day.
Appreciate you. God bless you, sir.